Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. And this week, again, we are live. I'm your host, Gorgeous George, and with me, as always, some of the sharpest MMA minds in the biz. Joining me this week goes from MMA Junkie Radio here in Sin City, Nolan King, the Boston shot caller. He's back East Coast representing. Mike Bond, back in Toronto after covering UFC 280 in Abu Dhabi for us. Cold coffees on the ones and twos. Let's get started. All right, fellas. Islam Makhachev, the era is upon us. After his impressive win at UFC 280, where he submitted Charles Oliveira in the second round to win the vacant UFC lightweight title, his performance was a continuation of what's been a dominant run of 11 wins in a row, including 5 finishes in a row in his last 5 fights. Given the current landscape of lightweight, do you see Makhachev ruling the division for years to come, and dare we say, surpassing Khabib Nurmagomedov's greatness? Goes, you're leading off.
That's an interesting question. I mean, really, when you think of the landscape of the lightweight division right now, it's always going to be tough, right? That's one of the toughest divisions in all of mixed martial arts, no matter whether it's Bellator, PFL, there's always good fighters there. So I think where the advantage for Islam is over Khabib is when you look at the guys that have kind of ruled this division for so long, the juggernauts, will say, they're kind of at the tail end of their careers. The Dustin Poiriers, the Justin Gaethjes, Michael Chandlers. Those guys have already had their wars, and I don't know that Islam's going to get to every single one of them. The way a guy like Khabib, he fought so many of these guys. So I think it's just a difficult situation. The guy is so tough. He's shown us a lot. But when you're going to compare him to Khabib, you have to nitpick a little bit, right? So I guess maybe there's still a couple questions I need answered. One is, all right, what are you going to look like when things don't go your way? If you lose a round, what are you going to look like in the championship rounds? Really, it's just nitpicking. But honestly, right now, the way things are going, I think it's kind of set up for Islam to have a pretty decent run. The guy that really sticks out is probably the guy that's not going to get a chance anytime soon. And that's Beneil Dariush. I think no matter where that fight goes, it'll be a tough fight. It'll be a guy that won't feel overwhelmed. But I think Islam is just going to chug along. And I think it's going to take maybe a little bit longer. Where he's going to need to stand out more is going to be in the title defenses. That's where I think he can maybe catch Khabib. But Khabib was just so dominant that right now it's tough to say, yeah, he's going to pass him. So I'm going to go with no until we see more.
All right, we'll put you on hold for now. I got it. That's fair. Nolan, the zero, the big undefeated. I think obviously Islam knows there's a 1 there. So, yeah, he can never match that. But he can surpass title defenses and other types of greatness.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I think when you look at Khabib, the big thing that was special about him was the fact that he had this mystique around him because he had that 0. I mean, he's done the unthinkable. He's walked away from this sport with a lot of wins and no losses. I mean, who else can do that? Who else has done that? Nobody has. We've seen fighters retire. Some fighters have retired early. Maybe they have 8-0, 9-0 records, whatever, before they even hit the UFC. Those are the only zeros that we ever see really walk away. So for him to be 29-0, there's the mystique, there's the selling point, there's a lot of what people are going to base their opinions on for years to come. And it's kind of unfortunate because I see Islam having a longer career as a champion, as somebody that's taking on the toughest challenge in the division at all times. Like Khabib, it took him so many fights to get towards to the title that I think there was a lot of other options out there that he could have taken on. Whereas Islam, he's champion. He hasn't fought any of these contenders. Like his best win before this was either Bobby Green or Dan Hooker. He's got a lot of contenders that he can take out as champion and build that legacy. And I like that he's fixated on defending the lightweight title. How many times do we hear somebody, win the belt and say, hey, I want to move up. I want to, it's already the talk begins, but he's said that he was focused on building his legacy around this weight class. So I think it's possible, but I think that the fact that Khabib has that 0 is always going to be the big selling point for him and drawing a lot of fans into siding with Khabib.
Yeah, agreed there. Pavan in the chat says Islam, more technical. Khabib, it's just constant pressure, elbow, cough, cough. All right, Mike Bond, what do you think, man? You got to see this guy up close do some work against Chucky Olives, destroyed him.
Yeah, he's really good, man. And it's interesting, right? Like, he won the title in his 13th UFC appearance. Habib retired after 13 UFC fights. So you kind of look at the trajectory of their careers there. Islam's obviously going to have many more UFC fights than Habib did. And Habib even said, himself, I get it, he's trying to hype up his guy and trying to put Islam over, but he said, he's better than me, pretty much better than I ever was, and is going to be better than I ever will be. So I guess that's the ringing endorsement from Habib, even though he's clearly biased in that regard. But I think Islam is poised to have a pretty tremendous title reign, but I think the biggest challenge might be the first one up in Alexander Volkanovski. I think a guy who's arguably, who's not even in the division is arguably his biggest challenge and the best stylistic matchup for him. In my opinion, the odds came out already for this fight, and I think Islam's around right now minus 300 or so. And I think he would be a bigger favorite, probably over anyone else in the top 5 at this point. So this could maybe be a very short-lived title reign if he doesn't get past this first defense. But if he does, I think, like these other guys alluded to, he's a much better matchup for the Dustin Poiriers, the Michael Chandlers, even Beneil, Dariush. So I look forward to seeing, how this unfolds for him. But I think the first test is really going to be the first one. And after that point, I do give him a pretty good chance of breaking that lightweight record of 3 title defenses, which I believe is held by 3 or 4 guys at this point. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see what happens with him.
Yeah, no doubt, man. I can't wait to see what his era is like. And yeah, Volkanovski's a tough out to start with. Ramses Herrera in the chat says, how is Islam going to look in the championship rounds? I wonder how his opponents are going to look if they make it to those rounds. Well, you may have just answered your own question. That's how great he is, I guess. We can't even answer that question because he's just dispatching people left and right. But we're going to move on, and I want you guys to continue putting those questions and comments in the chat. We'll get to as many as we can. Topic 2, in the co-main event at UFC 280, Aljamain Sterling defended his bantamweight title versus TJ Dillashaw. Sterling dominated the fight and eventually stopped the former champion in the second round by TKO. However, the big story here is that Dillashaw was fighting with a pre-existing shoulder injury that flared up in the first minute of the fight as the shoulder was dislocated from its proper place. Dillashaw shared post-fight that the injury first occurred in April, and since then, throughout training camp, 20 times that bad boy popped out. Did Dillashaw make a mistake in fighting Sterling with the shoulder issues that he's had in camp? He apologized for holding up the division. Was that even necessary? All right, Nolan, it's on you, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even really know what to say. Was it a mistake? Yes. I mean, look at how the fight played out. I think that it's pretty big mistake. I mean, if he was concerned about losing his title shot or losing his title opportunity, well, he lost it in a different sort of way. And it was one-sided domination from the start. He was, debilitated in a certain regard. And I just felt like we the fans were robbed of a fight. I think that if TJ is going to apologize to somebody, it should be the people that tuned into that fight. And I don't necessarily think, him apologizing for holding up the division is necessary. But I do think for people that tuned in thinking, and for Aljamain Sterling too, I mean, he wanted to prove himself, a guy that's obviously has a lot of doubters. I'm sure he wanted to go in there and not have some sort of, not leave himself open for some sort of criticism or some sort of lack of credit, that, oh, you fought somebody that was hurt, you're not that good. I'm sure that's the last thing that he wanted as well. So I think that the fans, took an L on this one. Obviously, Dillashaw did. I think Sterling isn't going to get the credit he deserves. So it's kind of a bad situation all around. Obviously, I would like to hear more about how he was allowed to fight. I know Dana White said they didn't know. Sounds like Mark Goddard knew from what he was saying to the announcers on the broadcast. Dillashaw told him beforehand. So kind of just a unfortunate situation all around and just kind of a waste of everybody's time.
Tell you what, man, I'm here in Vegas, and I know a lot of people that wish they would have known, if you know what I mean. Mike Bond, how about you, man? You wish you would have known?
Yes and no. I mean, there's a lot of layers to this, right? Like, obviously, a lot of these guys are going into fights banged up, injured, but it sounds like this was a pretty detrimental injury to TJ. If what they're saying is true, that he wasn't even able to hit pads or warm up in the back, like, this is a pretty compromising injury. And as kind of Nolan said there, like, if he had pulled out, who knows when that title shot comes back around, right? Or if it does. Bantamweight is extremely deep. There's a deep queue there of guys ready for title shots who have names, and who knows, TJ has to fight again. He loses. Maybe it never comes around. You have to take into consideration before this, he had only fought once in 45 months. How badly did he need that paycheck? And did that contribute to him not being able to pull out of this fight for that reason? So yeah, I feel kind of bad for the guy. I know a lot of people, want to hate on TJ Dillashaw, and rightfully so for a lot of reasons, but for him to kind of work his way back to this point and have that happen so early in the fight, we didn't get the fight we were expecting. He talked a tremendous amount of crap going into this fight. He said it was for good reason. He wanted to lure Aljamain into doing a striking fight with him, so he didn't have those grappling exchanges where the shoulder could be compromised. But this was a pretty rough outing for him. I don't know where he goes from here, honestly. I mean, does he have to get surgery on that again? He already got surgery on both shoulders during his USADA suspension. How badly is that going to mess him up going forward? He's going to be, I believe, 36 years old soon. So, man, I think this might have been kind of the end of the road for TJ. And maybe he knew that coming in. He said, this is kind of my do or die moment. He was obviously so confident in his skill set, especially after beating Corey Sandhagen, after blowing his knee out in the first round of the last fight. Maybe he thought, hey, I can do it again. But it was a complete, one-sided loss for him and not many redeeming qualities. It's just, obviously unfortunate. These guys very often go in there injured, and you wish it didn't happen, but yeah, I'm sure we all wish we knew, but this fight wouldn't have happened if that was the case. If he goes to the UFC and says, I'm injured that badly, maybe they just don't clear him to fight. So he had to bet on himself. And I guess for me, probably came down a lot to that financial situation. He probably had to fight in his mind.
Yeah, goes 36 hours have gone by. You've had a chance to think about this, think this through. How do you feel about it?
How could you hate on TJ Dillashaw? He's been a model citizen until now, right? It's so difficult, but look, man, dude, this guy has just been really, really making some bad decisions in his career. I can understand possibly why he did it. Like Mike said, he hasn't fought very much, probably needed a paycheck. I can relate to it to a certain extent. What I don't understand is why would you say it out loud in front of everyone? This happened not too long ago, guys. Aaron Pico, right? And what were we all talking about? Wow, the ball's on Aaron Pico. He gutted through. He tried to fight as much as he could. That's all the stuff we'd be saying now about TJ Dillashaw had he not said what he said. I don't know who told him that was a good idea to say. We'd all be talking about how brave he is for fighting with one arm, but now we're not, right? Now there's a lot of people that are saying, why did I pay for this card? I don't feel like I got my money's worth with this situation. How do I know this isn't going to happen going forward? Fighters feel cheated for their spots. The trajectory in the division now is kind of shaken a little bit. People who put their hard working money on the line, gambling, which, whatever, to each their own, but people have done it. They lost their money on that. And how about the announcement the week before, right? Fighters, don't be gambling on yourselves. Don't be gambling on fights. Like, dude, that could have been really, really nasty if another fighter found out that information or put it out. It's just such a terrible situation to be in for TJ Dillashaw. I think the reason he did it is because I think this is the end, guys. Like Mike said, the 2 surgeries, I imagine it's going to take another surgery to clear something like this up again. I don't think we're going to see TJ Dillashaw again.
And poor Sterling, he's not even getting full credit for the title defense. He looked great, granted, he looked great against the guy that kind of only had one shoulder going, but even Sterling, he can't get that traction going. Remember, he won the title under the circumstances of the disqualification. Then he rightfully beat Petr Yan in the second one, and now this being another title defense, there's going to be a lot of haters. He's got a lot of haters. I heard the boos that are just going to not give him the full credit. In the chat, Toke says TJ is injured. His injury falls on TJ. And Draven Huckleberry says TJ is dead to me. Mike, you wanted to chime in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the reason, to Goz's point, why he did come out and say it, he's probably embarrassed, right? Like, he, as I said a lot of things about Aljamain Sterling. For him to go in there and get smoked like that, he was probably feeling like he had to say something to justify it right in the moment. And
but wouldn't the injury itself,
what's that?
Mike, wouldn't the injury itself kind of be the justification without having to give us too much of a background?
You don't have to say 20 times.
Yeah, you could argue that. I mean, we got a weird feedback here, but yeah, I think that was probably a lot that had to do with it. Was the he just felt ashamed in that moment. He said a lot of bad things about Aljamain Sterling, and for him to have that happen and lose in that fashion. I know that, like you said, you gave Aaron Pico the credit, but Yeah, it just seemed like a really bad one for him. So I do think there's, as I said off the top, many layers to this. And yeah, it does take away from Aljo's win in the moment. But for TJ, yeah, I think he's just, he was ashamed of himself in that moment.
Here comes a good comment from me, Diamond 44. He says, imagine if TJ had won, then held up the division as a champion because he needed to get the shoulder looked at. Would have been bad. Now, granted, that's one of those injuries like ACLs and Achilles heels, 9 months to a year. So if he was worried about holding it up, sorry guys, going into it, imagine coming out of it. I wouldn't have shared it either. I feel you on that part goes. Wait till they put that Hall of Fame jacket on like DC and then go, yeah, you know what? I was holding up the towel 5 years ago in Buffalo. Ha ha ha. We can all laugh about it then. But when you're holding that ticket and it says Dillashaw and you're 3-0, ready to go 4-0 and cash it, shit. Anyway, you back, Munchkin, or what was that? Was it you going?
That was bizarre. You guys all sounded like Alvin and the Chipmunks, like the audio. And then I looked at our stream and I was gone. So I have no idea what's going on here. We're live now. These are the things that we have to deal with. And I hope I never have to hear George Garcia as Alvin and the Chipmunks ever again.
What's weird is when we weren't live, this rarely happened. So
right.
It's like so weird that when we go live, it does.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to move on to topic number 3 here. In the featured bout, sticking with the bantamweight division, Sean O'Malley defeated Petr Yan via split decision. To sum it up, the judges agreed on round 2 going to Yan and round 3 going to O'Malley. I looked at it. It's on MMA Junkie. Just go to judges' decisions. Where the judges were split was round 1. 2 went with O'Malley, 1 went with Yan. I rewatched it this morning. I'm sure you guys have, so I can't wait to get into this one. This decision, however, was disputed amongst many in social media. I'd say overwhelmingly towards the favor of Yan. So what I want to know, guys, is did you agree with the decision? And what was your biggest takeaway from the fight? All right, Mike, get the party started.
I don't know if I agree with it, but I understand the scoring for it. It was a really close fight. For anyone, we can say this a million times. I say it over and over. Close fights are not robberies. And this was a close fight, no matter how you cut it. You could say that you thought Petr Yan won all 3 rounds. That doesn't mean it's still not a close fight. All those rounds were pretty, razor thin. And I could see an argument for either side. I think it all comes down to how you want to score the first round. I think round 2 was Yan's. Round 3 was O'Malley's. And how do you look at that first 5-minute frame? And if you, depending on your outlook, I could say it was for either man. So I'm not going to sit here and say, like some others did on social media, it was the worst decision of all time. The judges are screwing up the sport. It was a tough one to call. And I think the deciding judge on that was Ben Cartilage, who is one of the better judges out there, in my opinion. So it was a really, really close fight. And I can't be too upset about how it ultimately came out. I think for the division, it's probably, for the best. I know Petr Yan's had his moment. He's still obviously very elite. Sean O'Malley getting to jump forward and kind of having his name inserted in that top 5 now. It's only going to be better off for, the momentum of the weight class. He's got that name and that following to bring into potentially a title fight, maybe a number 1 contender fight next time around. I know Dana White saying going into this event, this was 100% a title eliminator. He named off all 4 potential pairings, depending on who won the title fight, who won this eliminator. He was even willing to do Sterling versus Yan 3 if it came down. But as soon as the fight ended, he kind of walked it back and said, no guarantees. So they got some decisions to make on how they want to handle Sean O'Malley going forward. This is a fight based off this that you could do again between O'Malley and Yan. I don't want to see it right away, but I think you could do it sometime down the line and would have a storyline and some momentum behind it. So I don't think this is the worst outcome in the world for, unless you're Petr Yan.
All right, fair enough. How about you, Goes? Did you agree with the decision? And also, let me throw something in here. O'Malley said it's inevitable that he's going to be the UFC champion. Are you a believer, Goes?
Look, night of the fight, I thought it was a bad decision. I went back, I watched it 2 more times. I still feel the same way. I still feel like Yan won, but I do feel like it was close. Rounds were close, so you can't call it a robbery. But I thought it was pretty obvious that Yan had won. Okay. I mean, look at the first question that was asked of him, right? From another fighter in the post-fight interview. And then look at the way he even responded to that. You go to websites like MMA Decisions, right? 26 people unanimously agreed that Yan won that fight. You know how hard it is to get 26 people to agree on anything? If you were to bring up, is pizza good? I bet you there'd be 2 bozos that go, that sucks. 26 people agreed. So I feel like it's pretty safe to say, yeah, we feel like Yan won. It wasn't a complete robbery, but What are you going to do? This is what happens if you keep the fight close, right? But going forward, I think the one takeaway that we could take from this is I think we can all agree Sean O'Malley deserved to be there, for all the crap that he gets throughout his career. I think the kid did prove that he deserves to be at this high level. But I mean, look, you're a madman if you don't think Sean O'Malley is going to get the next matchup. That was predetermined way before. There's no way they're going to risk him against anybody else. He's one of the UFC's favorites. That's just how it's going to be. Going back at the PI today, they should be throwing rose petals at Sean Shelby's feet because he's the guy that kind of set all this up. Now, how long will it last? I don't know, because Aljamain Sterling, if you look at it matchup-wise, could be an absolute nightmare for a kid like Sean O'Malley. But Sean O'Malley, he's proven a lot of people wrong. So will he be champ one day? It could happen. But I think as long as Aljamain Sterling's champ, I think that's going to be difficult.
All right, I can't wait till the end. Nolan, give me a second here. I got to jump in. I'm like one of those little girls, and they're playing double dutch, and you see your opening. Now it's my opening. I got to tell you, I rewatched the fight this morning, and the first round is really what I was concerned about. And, man, it was close, fellas. But I honestly think that what it came down to was that O'Malley landed a cross that was so heavy on Petr Yan that I think both guys and their takedowns, both guys and their leg strikes, the punches, their jabs, even the warnings of the fingers, it was all pretty even, but I think he just had the heavier artillery, so that's why I kind of saw it. Now, that, to be fair, on Saturday, I thought Petr Yan had won round one, but Nolan, take it away.
Yeah, I got to rewatch it again. I know we're going to have a judge is going to judge coming out about this, so maybe I'll give a more, score-heavy, focused analysis than that, but I will say that my biggest takeaway, since everything's about me, is that I was wrong. I was wrong about Sean O'Malley. I thought that he would not have a shot to be champion. I thought it was a pretty resounding no, and now I'm in a pretty resounding maybe. I think that he could do it. I think that he is an elite bantamweight. I think his rate of improvement, while maybe not every single fight we see a hugely advanced version of the one before, I think if you look over a stretch of time, he's gotten a lot better. I mean, imagine 2 fights ago, us saying that he would even put himself in this scenario, that he would be in a debated decision that was high-level fight of the night against Petr Yan in a title eliminator sort of situation. I don't think many people would be siding with him. So good for him. I think he's, obviously he's had that effect, kind of like Conor McGregor. I'll never compare somebody completely to Conor McGregor, but he's had that attention, and with that comes the doubters, and with that it becomes a little bit muddied on how good he is. But I think now the biggest takeaway for me is we can say that he is an elite bantamweight and that he could challenge for a title, and that it's not out of the question that he could win. Now, like George said earlier, the guy with the belt right now is a horrible matchup for him. I think Aljamain Sterling's wrestling, I think his top game, I think would be too much for Sean O'Malley. That's still an area that I think there's some question marks about. Styles make fights. We never know how this is going to play out. We don't really know if he's actually going to be next, and I guess we'll see who Aljo fights next and who ends up ultimately having the title whenever Sean gets there.
Yeah. Amberly Rose in the chat says damage matters. John Warner in the chat says Sean won rounds 1 and 3. So he's kind of on the same wavelength as I am. I did not know that about MMA decisions. Did you say it was a shutout? 26-0 for Yan?
26 people agreed. That rarely happens, guys.
Maybe I need to rewatch it just so I got my stuff straight.
Do we think he's going to get the next shot, though? I don't know. I think he, said at the press conference, too, that he wants a new contract before then. We'll see how that comes to play. Maybe he asked for too much and they go in a different direction. Dana White even said they are looking at Henry Cejudo. Maybe he's the next guy. He brought that up on his own before he was asked about it. If it was up to me, I'd like to see them maybe do Cejudo and Sterling, and then maybe you do O'Malley and Cheeto Vera rematch. And if he wins that one, he wipes the slate clean, and then there's the clear path to the title shot.
Yeah, I don't hate that either. Again, I'm not a fan of people jumping in line, but this isn't a scenario like Beneil Dariush is sitting there and he's getting cut. Like there's the guy that's in the number one position or the next one up. You could argue it's Cheeto, you could argue it's Sean, but nobody's like this clear cut, like, damn, this guy's getting passed over. Like this would be the time if you were going to do it.
I really do like Cejudo, but man, yeah, cutting in line, like, oh man, I feel for Cheeto because I think O'Malley's going to leapfrog him, even though he's got the head-to-head over him. But I think we all get it, business, right, financial. But if Cejudo's going to do it, because O'Malley's willing to stand back, then I think Cheeto should be the guy that jumps in. But whatever, what do I know? All right, topic 4. Earlier in the evening, I guess it was morning for us, Belal Muhammad finished the previously undefeated Sean Brady via TKO. And Beneil Dariush defeated Matthias Gamrot via decision. Actually, he's Polish. Both fighters are worthy of title shots, as we know, and boast 8 fight winning streaks. However, they've had a hard time convincing the UFC to put them in a title fight. While it doesn't seem likely that either fighter will get a title shot next, which of the two fighters do you think will compete for a title shot first, in your opinion? It's on you, dog.
Man, it's super unfortunate that both these fighters are in this situation right now because it really is an uphill battle. And both guys are doing everything they can possibly do. They look great in their fights. It's just the landscape right now. I mean, honestly, the only way I see either guy getting a title shot anytime soon is if they're slapping their opponent for it in the Slap Fighting Federation or whatever the hell that's going to be. I'm telling you, Belal Muhammad's stuck, all right? Usman's going to get his rematch, right? That's going to dictate a lot of what we see going forward. You got Covington and Hazma. It looks like that might happen. That's going to be a big deal depending on the winner of that. That could set Belal back even further. So it's really interesting situation. But here's like kind of a crazy scenario that I think could get Belal Muhammad a shot sooner than later. And that's if Khamzat fights Covington. If Khamzat misses weight again, but the fight still happens and he wins, how could you give the guy a title shot? After missing weight twice, it wouldn't happen. Then I could maybe see Belal Muhammad kind of slipping by, something like that. But it's unfortunate because Belal Muhammad has great skins on his wall. If you look at the last couple people he's beaten, those are tough competitors. But Beneil Dariush, he's in the same boat, guys. I feel like Hasbulla would get a shot before he would get one. Like, look at the people that are in front of him. Look at the people that could just pop in at any moment. A Conor McGregor, you never know what's going to happen here. And now he's got to wait out Volkanovski, which honestly, guys, I don't understand that matchup. It's not something that anybody was clamoring for before it was brought up. The fact that he called him Shorty doesn't help at all because he's right. When they stood next to each other, you go, what? Those two are going to fight? Why? They just don't. I mean, there's still people for Volkanovski to fight at 145. So it's going to be a long wait for a guy like Beneil Dariush, which sucks because he really does deserve this fight. I don't think he's going to get it anytime soon, but I think there's a way maybe he can get it before Belal Muhammad. So that's going to be my pick.
All right. Nolan, next up is you. A lot to cover here, but I got to tell you, this is a serious show. Don't be ridiculous with that Hasbulla stuff. We all know he's a featherweight. Him and Volkanovski got beat. Go ahead, Nolan.
No, I agree with Goes. I think Dariush is going to be the guy that if I had to pick, well, they're kind of on a similar timeline, right? Like if you think about it math-wise in your head, like they're not going to get the next shot, but they might get the one afterwards. So I think the thing that Dariush has going for him is kind of my tiebreaker is the fact that he's already being mentioned pretty heavily in the lightweight conversation. Like he was the maybe back up at the beginning of this training camp for the title fight. Like people like us and the fans are discussing like, hey, this guy's kind of getting pushed to the side. Whereas Belal, for whatever reason, UFC 280, let me just say this. UFC 280 had a number of different people that didn't get the credit they deserve for a number of different reasons, like we just talked about. I don't understand why Belal Muhammad is not getting the credit he deserved. There was no funny business. There was no judging issue. There was nobody that he was fighting was hurt. He fought a 14-0 guy that has never lost and had a fantastic finish against him. A guy that I thought he was going to get that credit, and I still don't feel like he is. So hopefully he can get put in that big title eliminator sort of position. But do I have faith that that's going to happen, that this is a just world and everybody's going to get what they deserve? No. So I'm going to go with Dariush. I think, again, we're just the discussion and the longevity of him being in this slot will be the tiebreaker if I had to pick one or the other.
Yeah, and both guys should get on the timeline of the champion, definitely. But I think I'm agreeing with you guys. But let's see if Mike.
I wouldn't hate Dariush being a backup either. I know last week we kind of talked about how it sucks, but like if he just goes in for this title fight, that's a beneficial thing for you know what I mean. That's where a backup should be utilized. I think a guy that's he can either sit around and wait, or he can have an 8-week training camp where they tell him ahead of time that you're going to be maybe put in this scenario. That way he won't be passed over again.
Yeah. All right. How about Mike? What are your thoughts here?
I like the idea of the backup Nolan suggested, but they're both wrong. It's going to be Belal Muhammad just based on timing, I think. And it's ultimately going to come down to, unless Volkanovski does beat Islam Makhachev. But let's say that all these guys involved winning, the champions keep their belt, et cetera, et cetera. You have to keep into account the timing. Makhachev is going to take the time off for Ramadan. mid-year, and that's going to keep him out for a little while. Who knows when he fights again after that? Maybe not till September, October, something like that. So that's a long wait for Beneil Dariush. He's going to have to fight again, unquestionably. Maybe he fights Charles Oliveira in Brazil. If he wins that, unequivocally he gets it. And then if Belal is going to have to fight again too, maybe he gets Colby, maybe he gets Hamzat. It's going to depend on if that fight comes together between them two. Obviously what happens in the Edwards versus Usman trilogy fight, but I do think Belal kind of has the better inside track here, just given the divisional layout, the timelines for the schedules, all those kind of things. So I think, Belal maybe does have a little bit more momentum in that regard, and just the timing's going to work out better for him. But both these guys in a just world do deserve title shots. Beneil Dariush saying at the press conference, if this whole thing was simply based on merit, I would be next in line. What more could I do? But he seems to be very understanding of the reality. He's going to have to fight once more. He's mentioning maybe Oliveira. I heard him do an interview with Submission Radio today, talking about Rafael Fiziev as well. So there is, he seems to understand his situation, as does Belal Muhammad. It's just going to matter on kind of the timing of the champions and when they're available to fight. I think for Belal, it could be a bit of a wait too, depending on how Usman versus Edwards 3 goes.
All right, Mike, I'm glad you brought up Ramadan, because that had been brought up on question 1. I just didn't want to bring it back, but Mike Concho, I have to give him credit. He was asking if Islam would kind of fight once a year like Khabib did because of that. Is that kind of like the feeling that will kind of always be within the schedule, and we may have to get a little used to that?
I think 2 fights a year is realistic. He'll try to do one early in the year. And maybe you could even do 3. I mean, I think Khabib did 3 a few times where he'd fight in like April and then fight in September and then fight in December. So that is doable. But once you're on a championship schedule, that was before Khabib had the belt, it alters a little bit. So I think 2 is probably the goal, as it is for most champions. We see most of these guys defending their titles twice a year. So I think that's probably realistic. 1 would only happen as if something gets derailed, like an injury or, some other extenuating circumstance that comes up that kind of takes the schedule off track. But look at Islam. He's fought, I think, 4 times in the past 17 months or something like that. So he's already been more active than Khabib kind of leading up to this point. So I'm not too worried about that, but it is, of course, something that the UFC is going to have to factor in, knowing that 100% there is this gap in each year where he is completely unavailable to fight. Got it. All right.
Al Huzail in the comment section says, Belal Muhammad got my attention. I am looking forward to seeing him in a few years now that he's been added to Team Eagle. Looking good. Now, Mike, since you were there, can you tell us real fast, is that a permanent move, or will he come back to Chicago, still do stuff with, I think it's called Valley, is the name of the gym there, and Lewis Taylor? Because Lewis Taylor did go with him for the 6 weeks, I believe, preparing for this fight. But what do you know about going forward?
I think going forward, it'll just depend on the circumstances, right? Like if he lands on another card with an Islam Makhachev or someone else from that team, I'm sure maybe he'll try to align the training camp. If he fights in Abu Dhabi again, absolutely. It made sense in this regard because everyone was kind of going out there maybe 2 weeks early, something like that. He went out much earlier than that and got in the camp. So I think it's just going to be circumstantial. But if you're him and you're looking at the performance and everything he was saying about how amazing that camp was working with those guys, I would want to attach myself to that team as much as possible. But we know that obviously Khabib spends a lot of time in Dagestan. He's not always available to train with year round. So maybe it is a thing where he spends the majority of his time in Chicago and then does, the final few weeks with that team.
Got it. All right, another comment here from Shy Toes. Rogan said we need 10 judges or more. 3 isn't working. I don't know if he's ever said 10. I know people have entertained 5. I guess my whole thing is if we can't find 3 good ones, according to people, then why would we find the other 2? Let me throw that around to you guys real quick. It hasn't been addressed in a while, but do you guys want more judges, or are you fine with 3?
For the most part, it works. There's just every now and again this does happen, but I don't think 5 would solve it because, like you said, you're still going to have the same problems just with 5 people now instead of 3.
Nolan?
Yeah, I don't think you can get rid of the human error, honestly. We can get as close as possible to maybe eradicating it. Maybe it can get a little bit better. Maybe we can do better with education and consistency, whatever. But I'm not sure if, sometimes I think we want them to be perfect, and we just got to accept that it's not going to be 100% perfect.
Mike, you're always on these press rows just like Nolan. Will we even have room for 10? What is this, figure skating?
Definitely not 10, but I wouldn't be opposed to 5. I mean, for me, experimenting isn't going to hurt. This is the only way we evolve the sport, the only way things get better. If we just stick with the same formula we do forever, nothing is going to change, right? So I wouldn't be mad at them trying it. Maybe you do it for X amount of time and you see that it works better. Maybe you see that it works worse, but I'm never going to sit here and be opposed to trying to adapt things and evolve the sport, because that's the only way we're going to rid the things that plague it so badly.
Good, well said. All right, let's move on to topic 5. This past Saturday at UFC 280, UFC 284 got a lot of love. Despite being over 3.5 months away, fans are pumped up about what could be the main event, and that's Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski. Again, not official confirmation, but almost as official as unofficial can get. So, guys, the endorsement already came from Dana White. Like I said, it looks like Perth, Australia, February. These two could mix it up. Now that you've seen them kind of head-to-head, are you into this fight? And, Volkanovski's attempt at champ status, are you feeling it? What are your early leans? Nolan, we're all ears. Go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously interested. I think as much as we criticize sometimes the matchmaking that comes with super fights or the timing or whatever, like when it comes time to watch two champions fight each other, who's going to say no to that? Who's not going to be excited? Who's not going to be intrigued? No one. Everybody's going to be into it. So I'm amongst that. I'm among those people that are interested. I thought that the face-off was really interesting. I think the size difference, sure, it's always going to be a thing when you've got somebody moving up in weight to challenge for a second title. You're always going to question the size, but I think particularly with this matchup, both in height and just in build within itself, I think is going to be really interesting. And yeah, I mean, matchup wise, I've been running it through my head, and it's a tough one. It's I feel like it's a weirdly big jump from 145 to 155, even though it's only 10 pounds. I think trying to do the MMA math in my head, I kind of broke my brain, but I am going to lean with Islam Makhachev just because maybe it's a little bit of recency bias, but I just think that that heavy top game, that strong wrestling is going to be very interesting for Alexander Volkanovski to deal with, like trying to get a bigger body that's really good at that style in that weight class off of him as his first challenge at lightweight. That just seems to me maybe just a tad too much for him to overcome.
All right, and Mike, let me ask you this. Usually, we've been in the sport for a while. This was usually reserved for champ who's cleared out of division versus champ who's cleared out of division. All right, let's go. Now, in this case, like you said, Makhachev's had this incredible streak, and he just beat a guy that had kind of cleared the division. So does he get a pass? Are you warm to this matchup?
I am, and I love the way that you frame that, because this is not about Islam Makhachev, the reason this fight is happening. It's because of Alexander Volkanovski, right? Like what he has done in that featherweight division, he has earned that opportunity. When he just did what he did to Max Holloway in that third fight, we were like, okay, like he's clearly head and shoulders above everyone in this division. Max Holloway showed he's the clear number one guy and, destroying the Yair Rodriguez. Maybe he didn't destroy Yair, but you know what I'm saying? He's beaten all these guys and proved that, he is a clear step here, and that Volkanovski proved he's way up here. So am I really interested in seeing him fight Yair Rodriguez, who's on like a 1-fight streak against a guy who popped his shoulder out? Josh Emmett, who's coming off an extremely controversial decision. If Arnold Allen looks spectacular this weekend, maybe that changes the conversation a little bit. And if he defeats Calvin Kattar, he would be on a nice run of his own with like 9 or 10 straight wins in the UFC. But for the most part, the featherweight division isn't super intriguing right now. And Volkanovski has done the work to earn this chance. He, as a champion, which I believe has never happened before, came in as the backup, made weight, was ready to fight both those guys. Like he did all the things he's needed to do to get this opportunity to be a dual champion. So this is more about him than it is against Makhachev. Yeah, you could do Makhachev against like the winner of Poirier and Chandler or whoever else out there, Dariush. You could do that, but I think this is kind of more Volkanovski's moment that he's earned. So I like the fight there. I think it's pretty fascinating. As I said earlier in the show, I think the betting odds on this, even though Makhachev is a pretty sizable favorite to start, are closer than it would be if he was fighting any other lightweight contender right now. So yeah, I think this is a great fight. Only the 7th time in UFC history there would be a champion versus champion fight. In the previous 6, the guy from the lower weight class has won 3. The guy from the higher weight class has won 3. So this is good stuff. I mean, it'll be just the 2nd fight in UFC history with guys with double-digit winning streaks fighting each other. We just saw the first in Makhachev versus Oliveira. So this is great. I love this fight, and I'm very much excited for it.
There you go. All right, goes. Finish things off here. Volkanovski, Makhachev. You saw him face off. Little bit of a difference, but then, hey, Petr Yan and O'Malley had that type of a difference, and it didn't seem to matter too much.
Man, I love Alexander Volkanovski. He's one of my favorite fighters to watch. I think he's one of those people where if I had a son and I was going to tell them, here's somebody to look up to, it would be Alexander Volkanovski. But I have zero interest in watching this fight. At 155, I memean, Alexander Volkanovski is one of the smaller 145s. We've seen what happens when a 145 goes up and fights at 155 with Max Holloway. It didn't feel like we were looking at the same fighter. It really just seemed like the size mattered in that fight. I don't want to see that happen again.
What about when McGregor moved up and fought Alvarez?
Yeah, but it's a different body type, man. Like right now, you saw them standing next to each other. I mean, he looked like he could be a skeleton or something, dude. Like they just didn't seem to be on the same wavelength. And what happens if he wins? We're all bitching about the divisions being held up. What if he wins? You think divisions are going to be held up then? It's going to be even worse. What is the point in doing this? I really don't understand. I'm not saying it can't ever happen. It just doesn't need to happen now. Makhachev's been champ for, 24 hours? Give the guy a break. You're already giving him a champ from another division. Like there's people like Beneil Dariush that's just right there that would be a good fight. And I understand money. I get it. But at some point, your sport has to make some sense, right? It's got to make some sense. You can't tell fighters go out there and win, do this, say that, do that, and not give them title shots. I just think it's a bad idea. I don't know if it's going to be a great. I'm not saying that Volkanovski can't win the fight. I just think it just doesn't need to happen.
Do you not think Volkanovski has earned this, though, as I said goes? I mean, that was kind of, this isn't really about Makhachev. This is about Volkanovski. And the guy, I think he is built. He's fought at 55 twice in the UFC before he did his featherweight drop. He's obviously the former rugby player who was like 230 pounds. I don't think he's the smallest featherweight out there. Maybe he's not the tallest, but he's an absolute force. You know, he says that training with Izzy, training with, Hooker, all these guys, strength has never been a problem for him. So I think he's earned the shot. And I think for him, it's more, as I said, it's more about him than it is about Makhachev.
I think you could say that he's earned it, but I don't think you can say that he's earned it past some of these 155ers as well.
Interesting. I mean, yeah, 3 of the last 5 of Volkanovski have been Holloway. I feel like, would it be the end of the world to have Volkanovski versus Emmett in Perth, but also have Makhachev versus Beneil Dariush? And then if they both win, bring them in. I don't know. I kind of understand that part where there's quality challengers waiting to challenge the champions. But yeah, man, this does appear to be about Volkanovski, and I can appreciate, even though he was a little bit of a hijacker of title shots and stuff like that, I can appreciate his hustle, man, flying all the way down there, not even knowing what's going to happen, coming off a broken hand and bringing his whole team. Did he? Hopefully, he got paid pretty good, right, Mike?
It sounds like he was pretty happy with what they did for him in that regard. And for the pound for pound #1 fighter in the world, who almost unanimously ranked at that point, to do that, big respect for him. He put in the work and made the sacrifices.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right, guys, let's go to our last topic. This past week, we found out about a new venture for the UFC's Presidente Dana White. Yeah, we're going to talk about slap fighting. He's definitely taken some heat for the creation of Power Slap League, and so has the Nevada State Athletic Commission for voting to regulate it. The pervasive negative sentiment from critics centers around the unnecessary brain trauma, given that the rules of slap fighting is pretty much they prevent competitors from defending themselves. So, guys, how do you feel about this venture? Mike, we're coming back to you.
It's pretty interesting, I guess. I mean, the brain damage and things like that, head trauma. I mean, we're covering combat sports here. Head trauma is kind of a built-in thing when it comes to all of this. So I'm not going to get too up in arms about that. The people who are doing this are willing competitors. No one's, putting a gun to their head and forcing them to do this. So if they want to go in there and put that type of risk on the line, that's up to them. I'm not sure what type of money is going to be involved and things like that. What type of competitors we're going to see, if they're, complete randoms. I've heard that, there's been inquiries to, former UFC fighters. Dana White said if an active UFC fighter even reached out to him, maybe he would consider bringing them in. So I'm not ready to jump on board and completely trash this thing and hate on it. Is it something I'm super intrigued by that I'm going to clear my schedule to watch it? Not really, but I'm sure we're going to see things pop up. I'm sure we're going to cover it in some regard. Our man behind the scenes here, Ken Hathaway, is in Las Vegas. So I'm sure we'll be on site and kind of seeing what it's like as this thing grows and evolves. But there's so many, different kind of wonky combat sports things out there right now. I'm not going to circle this one and, deliver all my hate to it until I see how it unfolds a little bit more. I just think the reason that it is getting all this is because Dana White is attaching his name to it. So it kind of brings on that extra layer of focus. But for me right now, yeah, I'm not getting too up in arms about how this thing is going to play out. It's too early, in my opinion.
All right. How about you guys? What are your thoughts?
Well, when I'm not going to lie, when I'm going through my timeline and it pops up, I'll probably sit down and watch a couple. You'll never get me to pay for it or anything like that, or put off a college football game or an NFL game to watch it. But I just don't, I guess what I don't understand is what's the point? What is the point here? So if you have a champion in the UFC, they are the best fighter in that division. That's something to kind of walk around with your head high. I don't understand what the point is of the slap fighting. When we were in school, nobody ever said, hey, see you after school, slap off. It just doesn't happen, right? Like, it's all about fighting. So I don't get what happens at the end, how much money they make per fight. It's probably got to be a lot because the shelf life can't be that long. You can't be getting your ass slapped over and over like that. Like you guys said, if eventually you're going to have some kind of trauma. At the very least, we probably need to hear more information. I think the first thing that needs to be talked about in the rules is let's put a recliner behind them or at least a mat, right? The two guys hardly ever catch them when they fall backwards. So there's still like a lot of things to be talked about here,
like
but I won't completely crap on
guys
it.
back there.
Yeah, they never catch them. They always like hit the floor, right?
So it's 2 hits, boom and boom.
Just fall into a recliner. Isn't that the easiest thing? Or a mat?
You seen them two guys that fight and fall into a body of water? This is some crazy stuff, man. I was excited about Zuffa boxing, bring Lorenzo back. They were originally boxing guys. But yeah, this does seem almost like, why are two filthy rich people getting involved with something so questionable? How about you, Nolan?
Yeah, I mean, I really haven't commented on this publicly, and I'm not even really sure what to think. I mean, out of all the combat sports that I thought Dana White might dive into, was this the choice that I predicted? No. I think that it almost seems a little bit, I don't want to say below the UFC, but I mean, I'll have to see what the product looks like. But to me, it just seems like senseless brain damage is kind of the point of it. I know, again, it's a weird line we walk here, right? I think there's sometimes with MMA, even where I take a step back and I'm like, like safety precautions. Like, it's kind of funny considering guys just get head kicked and taken out on a stretcher. You know what I mean? Like, it's just there, but it's not black and white. I think you have to draw a line somewhere. And I think to me, this just seems like, again, you're having defenseless guys that seem like they might not necessarily have combat sports backgrounds do this. It's just, I don't know. It's not my cup of tea. Again, I'll have to see how it plays out. I don't see there's not much variance outcome here, right? Like, you throw two guys in a cage and a million things can happen. Like, I'm not really sure, besides, some guy getting knocked over backwards over and over again, like what the variance or the technique or whatever the outcome is. And like, even with some of the stuff they put in, like they said, oh, we have spotters and stuff. Like, there's a couple guys that look like they got dropped on that promo. Like, there's just nobody there. Like, they just hit the floor. So I don't even know what kind of safety precautions you can really put in, like put a mat behind the guy or something. But again, I'll have to see how this plays out. It's not something that off the bat, like, I'm going to be tuning in every week, I think, to watch. Then we can debate, what should and shouldn't be allowed, I guess, when we see more about it. But just to me, it's not my form of entertainment in combat sports.
He should have brought back American Gladiators. Or him and Lorenzo should just tell Mark Davis, step aside, we'll take it from here. Own an NFL team. It just seems to be like more prestigious things going upward than kind of going downward for Power Slap League. Because like Go said, I think I can take one or two of them and, whatever. But for the most part, I don't know. I can make an evening out of it, pay for a ticket to go watch it or whatever. But
and let's not be mistaken. I believe that this is going to be a huge viral hit for them. Like, I think, go Google slap fighting and see how many hits some of those videos have. Like 50 million views. It's perfect for the TikTok era. But again, I don't know beyond that. Like, will there be people that tune into this and like get very excited about the matches? Maybe. But I just, at this point in time, I can't comment.
It's going to be
I'd
a
be
hit
excited
for
for versus Ghost.
It's going to be
Garcia
a
Brothers
their
annual
lead sponsor.
slap fest.
Advil will make a lot of money. They'll probably be the #1 sponsor of that show.
This is true. All right, before I get slapped by cold coffee, guys, I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes between all of us. This has to be quick because it's big. This weekend, Jake Paul versus Anderson Silva. It takes place on Saturday. This is a boxing match, and it features one of the all-time greats from our sport, MMA, so we got to sneak it in. We got to talk about it. How do you see this playing out? Remember, You three cats were all about it about a month ago. Hopefully your minds haven't changed. We'll go with Nolan first.
Yeah, I'm going to lean with Anderson Silva as my prediction. And I've kind of realized, I think I said I was excited about this fight, that I was really into it, and I thought that this is the type of fight Jake Paul should be taking. I think it's because Anderson Silva's boxing. I don't think it's necessarily the Jake Paul factor. So I don't want my hopes and dreams crushed. I don't want to have this image of Silva going over backwards, getting stiffed by Jake Paul. So I'm going to lean with Silva for my own sake.
All right, Mike, you've probably talked to Jake Paul more than anyone on our side, or maybe even in combat sports. How about you, man? What are you feeling here?
I don't know, honestly. If you're going to make me pick, I guess I'll pick Jake Paul, but I don't feel confident about it in the slightest. I think Anderson Silva, how do we know what to really expect out of him? He's 47. He hasn't fought in over a year. The last fight that was an official boxing fight was against Tito Ortiz, of all people, and he looked spectacular, but that's, a 40-plus-year-old Tito Ortiz as well. So I don't know. I just think Jake Paul has invested so much into this. Who knows how much he's developed on the other side, having not fought in a year. I know he's worked really hard for this matchup. It's known that one he's known has been coming for a long time. So I don't know. It might not be the greatest fight in the world. I don't even know if it'll end in a knockout, but I do think maybe Jake Paul's going to squeak it out. But I wouldn't be surprised if Anderson Silva once again mesmerizes us and comes out of the matrix once more.
And Mike, you had a hater in the comment section earlier. I don't read those. I don't think they make any sense at all. But you are getting some love from Atachi Uchiha. He says, Mike, your journalism was good, too, at UFC 280. Nicely done. You and Fada were spot on. So he gives you a fist bump. Goes, how about you, man?
She kicked butt.
For sure. Jake Paul versus Anderson goes. Are you like this, or just tell me when it's over?
Somewhere in the middle. I think this would be a good time to implement that 10 judges. That's for sure, because scorecards could be out of this world for something like this. But what I do like about Anderson Silva is he does blend some of the fundamentals of boxing with his style. He takes it serious. The only thing that scares me, guys, is how many times have we watched an Anderson Silva fight and said, man, I just wish he did a little bit more. He was taking rounds off. You can't do that in this type of combat sport. So I'm going to put my name on Anderson Silva, but I wouldn't be shocked if Jake Paul won another one.
Beautiful stuff, guys. Great job on today's panel on SBC Live. You guys killed it. Cold coffee on the ones and twos. He killed it as well. I, of course, took it to another level. That was fantastic. Thank you to the comment section. You guys participating in the show. It's brilliant. I'm going to go down and look at the comments as well. I'll be throwing elbows with some of the haters, fist bumping some of the cool junkies that push this show. We're going to continue to make this show bigger. All right, keep it locked on MMA Junkie throughout the week. We got you covered with all of coverage for MMA, for all the promotions and some of the other combat sports as well. And we'll see you next week here, noon Eastern, for SBC Live. Until then, go out and be a champion.